Hello, and welcome to Conscious Curiosities, where we unlock the wisdom of the universe which lies within us. I'm Maria Luz, your host, a psychic medium, certified hypnotist, and astrologer. And today's episode is entitled Medical Astrology, Part 2. Last week, I introduced this area of astrology called medical astrology or health astrology, body astrology. It goes under different names. I'm going to start out with a quote. We know medical astrology works, even if the how remains unknown. Then we come to feel a deep gratitude for all those intrepid and often persecuted practitioners down the centuries who kept this flame alive for us to use, to enhance, and once again pass on to future generations. So here's the thing for me. At its heart, astrology is about observation, and medical astrology is perhaps simply mechanical observation purely done. And there's a similarity in what first drew me to science. And I if in case you don't know, to back up, um, I started out doing bench research. I did my undergrad in biochemistry, and just the million and one things to observe, and then attempting, to see a pattern in the repeated sets of data, which are data or observations. Um, that is what really lit me up about science, and I can say the same for astrology. And again, medical astrology is, I think, one of the more mechanical ways to look at things. You're not having to do analysis really in the same way as you are when you're, say, doing evolutionary astrology and you're helping people figure out which version is currently playing out. You just simply have to know the mechanics of how medical astrology works, which we'll get into today. And so I was thinking about, um, the how in that beginning quote. The how really only matters if your wish is to manufacture the what. So, if you need to recreate something, like in a laboratory, you want to make some product, you have to know how because you're going to have to recreate it. Um, but I think we can just put aside the how. Um, Although in the intro to Judith Hill's book, Medical Astrology, A Guide to Planetary Pathology, she does lay out the theories which have been investigated the most. But I do want to focus on the what because, again, that's what's pertinent to our everyday life and our well-being. And so that begins with your birth chart and what can you observe from the placements. And last week, I left you with some optional homework, and it was to list out your main maladies or malfunctions, whatever you want to think, however you want to think about them. But just those things that jump out at you as being maybe recurrent health situations or chronic illnesses. Um, and then I ask that you put the sign that those different planets are in. And I realized I forgot to include the lunar nodes in that list last week, but those are part of this, what am I calling it here? A paradigm, I guess, um, or pedagogy. So you will need to know the lunar nodes as well. And of course, they are always in opposite signs from one another. There was, sorry, I'm a little slow today. It's, maybe I'll explain later because it actually, of course, has to do with this. There is a synchronicity there. but I'm stopping to take some sips of tea. So there was also just a little fun extra credit last week involving looking at Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. So if you didn't check out the did I even put that in the podcast show notes? I don't know. Because I do, I do both the written on Substack and then I do the podcast. So if it's not in the podcast show notes, it's on Substack. And that link is always in the show notes. So back to the topic. Okay, so Judith Hill introduces a code of medical astrology, and she's the one I quoted in the beginning. And I mentioned her book, which all of the information today comes from. And that code of medical astrology has three basic components as follows. The first one, the planets. The planets in this system are the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and the lunar nodes. So, whatever app you're using, they will all have those. Most have, started giving you the option of adding even more than that, adding asteroids and things like that. But for now, we're going to stick with these points. And then the signs are just the 12 zodiac signs from Aries to Pisces. And then the houses are the 12 divisions of the birth chart. And I use Porphyry. I think I've mentioned this before, just because that's the lineage in which I was trained. But you may use whichever you're most used to using. So that could be just the default in whatever app you're using, or whatever you use to generate your free birth chart. And note that the houses, which are most important in health, are the first, which of course is about self and physical self. And then the sixth house, which is about daily activities, including health. And the eighth house, which is shared resources, life and death, transformations. And then the 12th house, which is could be, other realms, things that are hidden with us, things that are confusing, confinements, including hospitalizations. But for now, just we're going to focus on the first two principles of the 10 that she lists out as part of this code of medical astrology. And those first two are number one, planets are the activating energies, describing various types of symptomology and pathology. And the signs represent the body parts. As you can imagine, this could get very complicated very fast, just from that list of players that I've spelled out so far. But for today, just keep in mind the signs which seem most prominent in your chart. And in order for us to keep it simple, let's, for today, just consider the signs that your sun, moon, and your rising are in, as well as any signs that have two or more of those quote planets, which are the list of the standards plus the lunar nodes. So, if, for example, I use my birth chart as an example, I end up with a handful of signs. I have Aries because I have my moon there. I have Leo because the sun and Mars are there. I have Virgo because that's where my south node and Mercury and Pluto are. And I have Libra where Uranus and Venus are. And then I have Scorpio where my rising and Jupiter and Neptune are. And as I walk through the physical correspondences for each sign, I will then have a general sense of which of my maladies that I consider kind of most troublesome may correlate to those prominent signs because they have planets in them, or because they're just super important planets like my sun. And the goal here is just simply to understand your birth chart and yourself in a different way. So it's not really, we're not trying to diagnose right now, or, well, I actually will never use that word because get arrested by the people who arrest fake doctors or something. But it's not to diagnose or remediate issues, although you are in charge of your own health, and that may organically just come to you as you tune in. Like you might see some patterns. And as we go through this series, you may come up with ideas of your own. And that would be so cool. So I'm going to read through the signs and their physical correspondences. And I take this verbatim from Judith Hill's book, Medical Astrology, A Guide to Planetary Pathology. And for those of you who go over to Substack, it's all typed up there. And yes, it was a lot of typing. But it was also worth it because I think it may create some of those light bulb moments out there once you see how there is a logic to these perhaps seemingly random things that you deal with in your health. And about the typing, one of my first jobs was as a pretty much horribly incompetent secretary to my dad. But of course, beggars can't be choosers. And, he needed someone who didn't mind tagging along at whatever time he wanted to go to his office on the weekend. So I was typing up these legal briefs on this annoying pleading paper. It's the kind with all those numbers, and you had to line up the the text with the numbers just so. And so this was much easier. And even though it was a lot of typing, it really wasn't too painful. And then also, I'm putting all this information in here. However, I must also urge you to buy Judith Hill's book, or at a minimum, visit her website, because what I'm presenting in this series is just a minuscule portion of her work, which is so thorough, detailed, and important. Okay. Yeah, so I will also put in references to the other chapters in her book, just because, again, I'm putting it verbatim here. And if you do happen to have the book or buy the book, it'll make more sense. But because it's a lot of body parts that I'm going to be reading, it may be a bit like yoga nidra, if you've ever done that, where the yoga facilitator leads you through focus your attention on the different body parts. So you may just fall asleep in this next part, which people do use podcasts to fall asleep. So that's also perfectly fine. Okay, so here goes. Starting with Aries, the head, skull, cerebrum, motor centers of the brain, frontal and lateral lobes, corpus callosum, eyes, optic nerves, crystalline lens of the eye, eyeballs, upper jaw, the teeth with Saturn and Taurus. Aries is probably more associated with the teeth of the upper jaw. And her note is to also see the sun in Aries and Aries diseases. Taurus, ears, neck, carotid arteries, vessels of the neck, salivary glands, lower jaw, sternocleidomastoids, cervical vertebrae, base of the skull, cerebellum, chin, taste buds, vocal cords, upper portion of esophagus, tonsils. Hearing with Gemini, teeth with Saturn and Aries. Taurus is strongly associated with the teeth of the lower jaw. Sense of taste with Mars, and the tongue with Mercury. The nose is under the rule of Scorpio. And C also, Sun in Taurus and Taurus diseases. Gemini, hands, arms, not elbow, fingers, trachea, bronchial tube, lower esophagus, upper lobe of lungs, scapula, clavicle, pleura with Cancer, voluntary nerves with Mercury, speech, hearing with Taurus. The capillaries, see Sun in Gemini and Gemini diseases. Cancer, stomach with the moon, mucous membranes in general, breasts and nipples with moon, rib cage, elbows, lower lobes of lung, spleen, gastric mucosa, pleura, some association with meninges of brain, and also the fatty protection of eyes, water retention, lower esophagus, upper lobes of liver, uterus, see Scorpio, the diaphragm with Virgo, temperature regulation of the body. See also the sun in Cancer and cancer diseases. Leo, the back in general, the spinal cord, heart, vena cava, aorta, the myelin sheaths. See sun in Leo and Leo diseases. Virgo, pancreas, lower lobes of liver, upper intestines, appendix, cecum, ascending colon, abdominal cavity, bile duct, diaphragm, solar plexus, immune system with Pisces, duodenum with Pisces, spleen, some relation to womb with Cancer and Scorpio, the sympathetic nervous system, the solar plexus, the diaphragm with Cancer. See Sun in Virgo and Virgo diseases. Libra, kidneys, lumbar region of the back. Leo is the back in general. Acid alkaline balancing, hormonal balancing, fallopian tubes, rains, distillation and filtration of urine, ovaries with Venus, veins with Venus and Aquarius. See Sun in Libra and Libra diseases. Scorpio, colon, rectum, prostate, anus, bladder, male genitalia, female genitalia, cervix, and glandular portion of uterus, along with the neck of womb, sweat glands, nose, pelvis, sacrum, coccyx. See Sun in Scorpio and Scorpio diseases. Next chapter. Sagittarius. Sorry, my dog is growling at and barking at some workmen. And I don't really want to do a lot of editing today. I'll try to explain why. Anyway, back to Sagittarius. Hips, hip bones, femur, thighs, sciatic nerve, arteries with Jupiter, gluteals, some relation to the spinal cord with Leo. The central nervous system is coordinated under Sagittarius, the voluntary peripheral nerves being under the opposite sign, Gemini, and the sympathetic peripheral nerves being more under Saturn, according to Cornell. Sagittarius squaring Virgo influences the sympathetic nerves. See Sun in Sag and Sag diseases. Capricorn, knees, the skin with Saturn and Venus, sebaceous glands, bones, nails, and cuticles in general with Saturn. The teeth are influenced in the sign, although are under the general rulership of Aries, upper teeth, Taurus, lower teeth, and Saturn. The gums are related to the opposite sign, Cancer. See Sun in Capricorn and Capricorn diseases. Aquarius, ankles, lower leg, Achilles tendon, circulation, veins with Libra and Venus, oxygenation of the blood, the little understood electrical system of the body with Uranus. See Sun in Aquarius and Aquarius diseases. Pisces, feet, heel, blood with Aquarius, moon, and Mars, lymph and lymphatics, duodenum, with Virgo. See Sun in Pisces and Pisces diseases. And note that Hill refers to Carter and Cornell, and I will put the full references in the show notes. So I keep saying why I'm off today. And one reason is that I have some heart issues. And last night I couldn't sleep or barely slept because I kept having what's called preventricular contractions or PVCs. And they're not super dangerous. It's not like atrial fibrillation or anything, but it is really unsettling. So I don't really get much sleep or sleep deeply when I have those. And I have a Leo sun. And even though Leo doesn't rule that many things, it rules some pretty important things like the heart. So yeah, and then the other part is my voice is going just because I happened to go see my son, who's a musician, play some music last night, and maybe I was like cheering for them a little too loud or something like that. Anyway, he's the son who composed the intro and the outro for this podcast. So that is the story there. And I hope you had some aha moments about your unsolved health mysteries. And aside from just uh, the kind of the placements that I talked about to begin with, looking at sun, moon, rising, the lunar nodes, and then anywhere where you've got kind of a collection of planets happening. There are other things like the south node is often an area of like health leaks, I guess I would describe it. Or the sign opposite your sun is also a compromised spot. And there are a few others that are super compromised as well. And so once we get to those, I think it'll really like round out your understanding of the patterns of maybe some troublesome chronic or recurrent health issues. And then we will also get to planetary transits, which serve to activate any of these underlying vulnerabilities. And if nothing else, maybe you feel validated that you are maybe not wholly or partially to blame for your health issues, because now you see there's a basis. And as I mentioned at the start of this series, medical astrology can provide a different lens, a more holistic lens than is used in our broken healthcare system. And that can allow you to view yourself and your health and hopefully understand yourself as more than simply a set of diagnoses. I hope you now feel empowered to continue your curiosity about medical astrology. And I thank you so much for listening. You can see in the show notes how to book with me or go and get a gift certificate for someone in your life and other ways to support me. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye bye.